think I'm turned off. This is a joint meeting of the Finance and the Human Resources Committees of the Joint Water and Sewer Commission. We have one member that still hasn't arrived. Hopefully Commissioner Stevens will show up. But we'll go ahead and get started. Do we have public comments today?
No, sir, we do not, but Commissioner Commissioner Stevens did advise that he will be a few minutes late.
He will, but he's on his way. Okay. For approval, item 1 is minutes from the November 20th, 2019 Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of the November 20th Finance meeting.
And I guess I need to second that.
That's correct.
We're on the
And
only,
then we'll vote.
and we're the vote. I've
right.
already reviewed them. Are you okay with them? Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, right hand. Raise the right hand.
We're good to go.
Motion passes. The next item is yours.
That's correct. I reviewed the minutes. Is there any change in them from my members of my committee?
I see none, sir, on this end.
Okay. One thing that I didn't see in here was some comments I made during the commission meeting regarding international health care. Did we put that in the minutes? Maybe I didn't.
Yes, sir.
I thought I had, I'm trying to find it.
Yes,
Okay,
sir. On page 3, the third paragraph, requested to be able to look at the higher cost surgeries and expenses that are done and to be done in the future and
Oh,
investigate.
okay, that's, all right. Yeah, okay. I just gave Daphne an email from my point of contact in Thailand, and she's going to give it to Katina, the hospital there that does these things. In fact, is JCS, or not correction, Joint Commission certified. And the cost of a transplant there is about $60,000, whereas the cost for a transplant here is about $200,000. And it is an option that we need to look at. And if our people want to use that as a where to get medical care, they have procedures set up. And I'm asking that she just look at it. It's not like a done deal. It's just an option. So with that, if there are no other changes to the, and you don't have to put that in the minutes now, but can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, minutes are accepted.
Okay. Item 3, workman's compensation insurance renewal. Is that on the agenda for finance or for human resources?
Both.
Okay, looks like we have a presentation from Jeffrey Singletary, TSI, Jarrett Bridges, Turner and Associates.
So in your packet, there was some information on the work comp renewal. This is a revision that was made, and this will be the revision that will be included, I guess, for March. Just a brief history, we have had the workers' comp insurance claims with a carrier called Zenith for over a decade now. This will be the 11th year. We went out and got proposals as we do every year, and this year it was very competitive. We actually have a proposal from a company called Bitco, also known as Bituminous, and they are actually the low bid. Their quote is at $251,765, and Zenith, the 10-year relationships quote, is at $257,231. So the two top proposals, basically the spread between them is $5,466. I would tell you, The relationship, looking back, we track these rates historically. Each year Zenith has given us very nice rate reductions. This year, our experience mod is going from I believe a 0.96 to a 1.27. So in all actuality, it's a 31% swing, but because of the rate reductions negotiated, it's actually gonna be a lower expense to the JWC with either option this year. So if you look at this sheet, kind of notes of interest, the expiring premium with the same payrolls would be $258,204. And the proposal by Zenith is $257,231, and the other carrier, Bitco, is $251,760. I'll tell you guys, Zenith has provided defensive driver training annually. We kind of got a cost number for that. We wanted to see, with a $5,000 spread in the quotes, what services were being provided by Zenith that we're not sure would be provided by Bitco or by Tuminous. And one of them is 100 employees training for defensive driver training every year. I think you'll see down at the bottom that cost is roughly estimated by Zenith's team at $2,035. It also helps the defensive driver training, your auto insurance, I think, as well, because it gives some training for proper driving techniques, et cetera. New this year, we've started using Zenith's training portal. All employees have been involved with that portal, and so far this year, we've even had sexual harassment training that we provided for all your team members through that portal. The expense for that portal the first year, in their estimations, they're not charging you for it, as part of being a policyholder, is roughly $18,600. And the first year has kind of a login type, front-end loaded charge, and in their mind, every other year, they estimate that cost would be going forward $15,000. Bitco does provide risk management services. I personally have not worked with their services at this point, but I had some information and we did our due diligence on them as well. They provide a loss control consultant. I'm just not sure or aware that they provide the defensive driver training, and I'm not sure how detailed their portal is. Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to share any other examples of what we've used the portal for at this point, but you know, the idea is saving $5,000 worth, leaving a 10-year relationship for the services provided by Zenith, and will Bitco match those services?
Yes, on the portal, we have just now, in the past 2 months, I would say, have it up and running. And as Jarrett said, company-wide, everyone is using it, not just for safety, but for other types of training, the sexual harassment training, as he stated. But we also are setting it up so that every new hire would have to go through certain trainings depending upon what department they're being hired to before they start work. So in their first few days of orientation, as well as tenured employees would still have to do certain trainings each 12-month period that they kept up to date. Again, like Jarrett said, Bitco says they have something like this, but would not give us, I couldn't go on and look at it and take a class and compare apples to apples. So a lot of their training, they say, would be requesting a video that they would send to us and we use, and then we pay the postage getting it back. Where Zenith's portal, we've been in it, we've seen it. We had it ready to go July a year ago, and we're told to hold off on it, but we do have it running now, and we can see the trainings. People are doing them, and they're solid trainings. Again, with the spread being no more than it is and our long track record, I can also say I don't have any experience with Bitco. Our 70-something clients, 20-something carriers that we use, we've never actually had them with a client. Where Zenith I have. To me, they're by far the best as far as the service and the adjusters. When a claim comes in for you guys, I know who the adjuster is going to be. You know, if it's medical only, I know I can go ahead and call Bonnie O'Regan and say, I just filed this, it's coming at you, here's my concerns. Or if it looks like it could be a little more severe, I can call Dawn Allman and let her know on the indemnity side that, hey, we've got a guy that's hurt pretty bad, it's coming at you, here's what's happening, here's what I know, what can we do to head off any problems. So, and they're fast, where a lot of other insurers aren't. So,
Are any of these other firms that are listed in the summary of quotes providing those kinds of things?
They all have an array of risk management services. I would say Liberty Mutual has probably a robust platform like a Zenith, from my experience. Richfield Casualty, they placed in third out of the quotes. They have a representative that would be involved, but they don't have the powerhouse of the online presence of a portal to go in and do training.
Okay, but all those bids are higher. What about Bitco? You don't know anything about what they're,
So that's what we were discussing. Bitco provides a loss control representative that would be involved. They have an online access to videos, safety type materials.
but we don't know anything about their program other than what you just said.
Yes, sir. I got
Right.
a document that basically described their risk management services.
Okay, so what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is, in your opinion, the best value is to stay with Zenith,
Yes.
okay?
What is this column with the header AM Best Rating?
That is their financial rating. Our firm and most insurance firms aren't allowed to sell anybody that is B-rated. So as long as they're A-rated, and like Zenith is an A7, so it's regards to the surplus that they have on their financials.
Zenith is an A7 and Bitco is an A+9,
Yes,
and A+9 is a higher rating than an
they
A7?
have, their surplus is a little bit larger.
A question about ratings. Is there an agency that rates their customer response in terms of claims processing, some standards there that perhaps you've compared?
I think that'll come back and,
No, sir, I'm not aware of any
More
type
about
of
Bitco.
sort of third-party assessment of responsiveness of claims. No, sir.
Okay, so nothing exists such as AM
There's
Best?
no barometer that I wish there was.
Okay,
That would help us agents find better markets.
right. So in general, we just have to go on to, your recommendation is because at this point, Bitco is an unknown to us in
Yes,
terms
they-
of performance.
Bitco does write a lot of municipality-driven business.
Mhm.
I just have not worked with them much. Kind of the thing that is important on our side of the table for clients is claim management. And I know going into it with Zenith, that we have two adjusters that we're gonna be involved on every claim. So there's a rhythm, there's a relationship they built. I know that they're gonna be responsive. I'm not aware, or I don't know if there'll be one assigned adjuster to Bitco's relationship. I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, and so Bitco didn't offer more discussion to you to try to sell you on this other than
They
the
did.
bid?
I mean, they did not, we didn't go down the route of the adjuster, but they provided with me materials on risk control services and things to that extent.
Mhm.
You know, their risk control services was basically referencing safety materials, that they would provide some training, but they didn't go into details. I can have a discussion before tomorrow with the risk control rep for Bitco if needed.
Okay, thank
Is
you.
this an annual commitment?
Yes, sir. A one-year commitment.
It's a one-year commitment, and when do we need to make the decision?
The effective date is January 1st.
January 1st, so we need a decision at the meeting tomorrow.
that's correct.
I think we need to know more about Bitco.
Okay. I will point out on the back of the sheet I handed out, this is the historic, it's really small, we can get a version that's larger, but this is using the exact same wages by the rate structures with the Zenith relationship that y'all have. And the bottom boxes in green is the variance in the premium to the current term being offered. So 257, 286 is $925 lower than the 19 rates, $34,965 lower than the 18 rates, $30,822 lower than the 17 rates. As you can see, 16 was 87,000 higher in that term with those rate structures, 15, 60,000 and 14, 113. What I mentioned earlier is that they have continually driven down your rate structure, base rates as well, with the relationship, and part of that has been y'all's ability to work with them, to allow their loss control rep to be stand-down safety day activity, so, but I will find out more information before tomorrow's meeting from BGJWSC.
Is not the largest contributor to rates our experience?
Losses.
Right. So what this is showing really is we've had a trend of improving safety performance. And so that's been the driver for the rates
I would agree
tailing
with that.
off.
I would tell you, though, that if you look at this year's experience mod, which basically is a 3-year look of your loss history,
Mhm.
they give you a 1-year buffer. So we've had a great year this year. I think we've had maybe 40, 50,000 in claims. The previous 3 years, we have in excess of 150 to 200,000 in claims. So our mod is peaking at this year. So this year inevitably could potentially, if the market and rates weren't negotiated appropriately, could have been the biggest expense to the water and sewer in this analysis, because the mod's one of the higher mods we've had. It will go down next year.
On this sheet in our packet,
Yes, sir.
is this still a valid?
No, sir.
It's not valid at all.
Both those sheets are not.
These are not. So did you have another one of these
I will send it
updated
out.
sheets for
I have
us?
one copy of it. I can leave. Yes, sir. I will send it to you.
On that sheet, each of the bidders have 3 columns. One column is labeled headed base, the next one is net, and the next one is premium. And it looks like base is multiplied by net to get premium, maybe?
No, sir. The way that works is the base rate is the starting point. The net rate is the true cost per 100 of payroll for that class of business. That includes drug-free credits, it includes schedule credits, it includes all the credits involved. So the net rate basically is a rate that is given as the true cost at the end of the day per 100 of payroll for that class code. So the base, the payroll divided by $100 times the net rate gives you the premium by class code. And then it totals out the bottom.
And then we have descriptions for each of those line items.
Yes, sir.
And I realize this one isn't valid anymore.
Right.
For example, Bitco, and Bitco seems to have some low base and net numbers in the first 3 categories,
Right.
lower than the others. But then under waterworks and sewage disposal, they're high.
Is a little bit higher.
They're high, considerably higher, looks like.
So the way to truly compare them is to compare the net rates, because they will adjust to reward you for performance or the aggressiveness of the market wanting to write the workers' comp, the scheduled credit, et cetera. So the base rates, kind of when you compare the analysis between the 2 companies, the net rates is really the bottom line number. The base is the starting point. The net includes the credits, the experience mod, all those components.
Mm-hmm. So, what do we need to do with this if we're gonna be able to go from today until, have it available tomorrow at the full commission meeting for a decision? What do we need to pass out of here today?
You technically don't have to pass anything to put it on full commission. We can put stuff straight on full commission while they ever come into committee. It's already on there for tomorrow anyway, and so we can bring back more information and have this discussion tomorrow, but you don't have to pass anything today for it to be on tomorrow's agenda.
I'd like to see more information myself. How about you?
I think so. I think the presentation needs to not be low cost. I want to see best value.
Yes. And I try.
And I want you to be able to justify why one is best value.
I mean, that's a good point. I tried to do that in the bottom analysis of the additional services that we've been using with Zenith, but I'll find that from Bitco as well.
Well, we need to, I mean, you gave us one set of services that you were really familiar with,
Yes,
but you weren't really familiar with Bitco's services.
right.
And, I mean, I don't think you need to do anything other than Bitco and Zenith unless one of the other commissioners wants to have that information. but I want you to be able to come in here and authoritatively tell me, if you will, what is the best value.
I'll do it.
You can say what your experience with them has been.
I will. I've got a brief one pager, but I will have a discussion with both representatives from Bituminous, the Bidco company, as soon as I leave this.
Okay.
And then I'll email it out, and that'll give them a chance to preview.
Can I ask a question about the chart that's in our package? You got 18 dash Zenith and then Zenith. What's the difference in those two? On this one? it's in
The 18 Zenith is what our current payment has been.
Okay.
This
And
would
then
be
you
your
got
current rate.
Bitco, and then you got Summit BZ First, which you don't,
That's Bridgeville Casualty, yeah.
okay.
I will probably, I can update this chart if you want me to, or I can simplify it and put it in this chart for tomorrow's full meeting. Depends on whatever y'all want me to do. But I'll-
Well, here it says AM Best for Zenith is AX, which is A7 here, A10 versus
I'll
AX.
double check that. Yep. I'll have all that revised.
Why don't you go ahead and upgrade this chart for us?
Yeah. Yes.
Update it. Now, Charlie, since this is on the approval agenda, do we need to do anything with this before we move to item
Well, we
4?
have to go ahead and move it to the full commission.
We have to have a,
Well, it's already on the full commission agenda. You can vote to defer it to the full commission agenda tomorrow.
so you need a motion, we need a motion to vote to
Okay.
defer it to the full commission.
I move, we defer this to the full commission.
I second.
And let,
Oh, we've got all, it's both committees voting on
Yeah.
this.
That's right. Okay. Wow. Do we need to, what you want me to do?
I think support
I think
the motion we made to
you just
talk
need to
about it
vote.
tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I support it, yeah. You haven't said, no, you can vote for us, yeah.
We're not selecting down one today. We're gonna defer it and do it tomorrow.
That's fine.
Okay.
and let
All
me,
in
you okay
favor,
with that?
raise your right hand.
Wayne, you all right there?
Yeah, we're all in agreement.
Motion passes. We're gonna talk about it tomorrow.
right, and let me just, since I won't be here tomorrow, I'll let my partner Dan, who's gonna be in attendance, talk about his experience with Zenith, but I know he has a long-standing relationship with Zenith and is very happy to do work with them.
Okay,
I
so-
know we've had
So
problems with.
you all work with them.
Yes, sir,
All of
they're
our
one-
litigated claims with Zenith have gone through Dan Lovin at Charles.
Have,
We have never worked with Bitco. We have
Okay.
worked with Liberty Mutual, but Zenith is one of our larger comp clients. We have a lot of local businesses throughout the southeast that utilize Zenith. And, well, I'll let Dan talk
Okay.
about it tomorrow, which is why I've
well,
gotten him to cover
I
it.
guess a key question is Bitco offering us a lowball bid?
Yeah. I
They're
mean,
offering us a low bid, they're also rated, their rating is high.
Yeah,
And
that's on resources.
The rating,
I
more,
would tell you, if you look at it, the concern I have is, I think Bitco's offering 26% scheduled credit, which is pretty aggressive. We have 10 years of equity built with Zenith, they're offering 20% scheduled credit. I think my concern would be if we made a change over $5,000 and we had a catastrophic year, we're finding a new home next year, the stability's gone, we're going through this process of trying to find the right partner for y'all. And
I think those are all things why you should say this is the best value.
Now, we need to hear that discussion tomorrow.
and my understanding as far, and Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but the AM Best rating has to do with their financial strength, not the satisfaction of their customers or clients. It's not, they have better satisfaction.
It's their
just-
financial strength.
Right.
the reason is Bitco is owned by Old Republic. Old Republic is a national carrier like a Travelers that has, regional offices, and they have a huge client base in different sectors, whether it be logging or construction, municipality or whatever, right? They write various lines of other insurance from property to liability to auto. So they're bigger per se because they're in more spaces. Zenith is just a workers' comp carrier. They don't write auto insurance, They don't write general liability, they don't write property. All they do is workers' compensation.
Okay, well, I think you ought to present all of
Yeah.
the factors. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank y'all. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Let's move to item 4, banking services recommendation. Ms. Roberts.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've periodically been updating the commission on our progress with this banking, merchant, and investment services RFP. Just as a quick synopsis, we had bundled those 3 services previously. The challenge had been made to us, make sure that we're getting the best value. Again, I'm hearing these words again, and Commissioner Elliott, there they are in your memo even before we get started. Best overall value. We want to be the best stewards that we can of the resources that are entrusted to us as the commission. So you'll see there in the memo, we did have a diverse evaluation team. So the detailed evaluation, I made a larger chart for myself, but this is the 3rd page in your read-ahead packet. If you see some variances in scoring there, we did have a diverse evaluation team. Each person on the evaluation team does interface with or does utilize that service directly within our organization, but we wanted to make sure that everybody was represented. So different people had different focuses within our organization. So again, that's why you may see some of those scores varying within those scoring categories. But those were the scoring categories that were used in scoring all 6 of the participants in the 3 different services. You will notice there that we have made the recommendation to stay with our incumbent BB&T for the banking services and merchant services. But the scores did show overall that Synovus would be the one to provide us the best overall value for investment services. So we have recommended that we go with them. Page 2 of your packet hits some bullet points as to why we made the recommendations that we did, and I'll just hit some of those highlights. For banking services, we did get a fixed formula pricing from our incumbent, which was based on the federal funds rate. It provided us a more stable method of calculating what return we would see on the funds that were utilized with them. All of these contracts, all 3, the banking, the merchant, and the investment services, will all be 1-year contracts with 4 options of 1-year renewals with each. For the merchant services, our incumbent did sharpen their pencil a little bit and give us a lower rate than we have had previously, but we believe that's based on the volume and the mix of transactions that we've had. Obviously, we're utilizing more and more of our online transactions with our customers, utilizing that paperless billing and that recurring billing that we've recently installed for them. But one very important factor to us was that there's no disruption to our customer base. We want to be sure that our customers can continue to utilize those services without having to go through a transition unnecessarily. And in this particular case, we didn't believe a transition was needed. We believe that, again, BB&T is providing us the best overall value for that service. For investment services, it came down to it being a money issue. As far as the rates were concerned, Synovus was more competitive with their rates. So that was the primary reason for us making that recommendation to change. As far as changing those services, we as an evaluation team discussed the fact that we believed that was the simplest one to separate from the 3. So as far as transitional costs or implementation costs, those were minimal. So again, we believe that was the best choice. So I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments that anyone may have. Yes, sir.
On Synovus.
Yes, sir.
Since they scored so much higher than everybody else, at least it appeared to, on their investment services, what kind of securities are they going to put us into?
Once again, our market is limited because of our organizational structure. And that was one of the things that there was the question that came up in passing conversation in the hall. Why did we have so few people that wanted to bid on our investment services? Again, as Mr. Donaghy has discussed, and when we had our financial policy passed, there are only certain types of investments that we can make as an organization. So that limits the abilities of anyone who bids on those services. It sort of boxes them in.
Did you say our ordinance restricts that, or?
I'm sorry, our financial policy. If I said ordinance, that was not correct. It's our financial policy.
Our financial policy mirrors Georgia code.
Okay, so it's Georgia
Correct.
code.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, that's
what I
correct.
wanted to keep rehashing, that we're
Yes,
not-
sir.
No, we're not overly restricting ourselves.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Is that different for the pension program investments as for our monies
The pension plan has their own set, but we can have that conversation separately if you like.
So they have a different set. The pension program
Yes,
has a
sir.
different set, because I've seen some of those investments.
Yes, sir, that's
and
correct.
They are, I mean, they're in the market.
Correct.
Some of those are in the stocks.
Correct.
So we cannot, apparently, our program for this Georgia code
Right.
permits that for pensions, but doesn't permit that for our monies.
That's
Our
my
other-
understanding.
It's different. That's-
Correct.
That's kind of strange.
So these aren't real tied into each other. I mean, you know, the proposals that they gave, you can accept one option and not all.
Absolutely, yes, sir, and that was our intent going in. We said we can take 3 different providers, 2 different providers, or have one provider give us all 3. So we analyzed all of those scenarios to see which, again, provided the best overall value to the organization.
And with BB&T changing Truist, that's not gonna change anything?
No, sir.
So we're not gonna have to go through any internal changes with them that we would've had to either way?
That's correct. And again, with the contract having the 1-year base and the 4-year renewable options, that gives us some flexibility if there are some challenges that we see with that relationship, but we don't anticipate that to occur, but we did leave ourselves that flexibility.
For their benefit, for the other commissioners' benefit.
Yes, sir.
This is the term of this agreement is how long?
It's a 1-year base with 4 1-year renewable options.
And those become effective on what dates?
At this point, we haven't issued the contract, but it will be annually on that
On that
anniversary
date.
of that contract,
On the
yes, sir.
anniversary of that contract.
Yes, sir. So we're looking to you to make the recommendation to issue the contract. Actually, it would be 2 different contracts now to these 2 providers.
And functionally, what would happen if we were to go with a different alternative for the investment piece than BB&T? Functionally, we just move the current investments over?
Yes, sir, that's
We don't
correct.
have to sell those?
That's correct.
We can move them over to the new?
Yes, sir. It's very administratively driven, and so it's a very simple transition for us to make. That was another reason that we believed that the transitional costs would be very minimal for us.
We don't have to sell those and give
And
BB&T
repurchase.
commissions
Correct,
on those instruments at this
Correct.
time.
Yes, sir, that's
We
correct.
can get those over to the new company.
correct.
Any more questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
So the recommended motion is that this is, that a finance committee approves and it goes to the full commission. Since the full commission's sitting here, is there any way is there any need to do that or discuss this again tomorrow, or can we?
I'll defer to my legal
end the
colleague.
motion and just make this
It's got to be through the full commission.
with the whole commission sitting here, that's what I'm asking.
This,
If the answer is no, that's fine, just. Fair enough.
Committee meeting.
All right, then I'll make a motion that the finance committee forward this item to the full commission for review and approval to enter into a contract with BB&T for banking and merchant services and a contract with Synovus for investment services.
Do I have a second?
I second, but I need to make a statement. I have stock in Synovus, but it is, I think it's less than $1,000, so it's not much. So that will not color my vote when I choose to vote on this. So you have a second.
Okay.
Just on that point though, I mean, for us to, I mean, that's great that you disclose it, but for us to have to disclose stuff, isn't there a percentage or something that we have? Percentage of what? I mean, of stock, I mean, I've got stock in Synovus and BB&T.
Are the
for that matter.
commissioners controlled in any sort of guidelines? They have to disclose their investments?
I mean, I was thinking it was like 12% of a company or something. I mean, we don't need to know it for now, but just for future, because I mean, I've got.
I don't have that
I don't
much.
recall there being a percentage in the, commissioner, what's it called, what's the name of the policy? I don't believe there's a percentage requirement. It's anything that's gonna color your, discretion.
Just good to
And-
know for the future, though, and just clarify.
And with regard to the other one, we have everybody here, but not everybody's able to vote.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted-
Any more questions? Discussion. Motion on the table with a second. All in favor? Raise your right hand. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That one moves forward. Item 5, SPLOST 5 intergovernmental agreement.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes, sir. We've previously entered into three total intergovernmental agreements with the City of Brunswick or Glynn County for SPLOST 5 funds. Two of them have been with Glynn County and one with the City of Brunswick. This will be the third one with the Glynn County SPLOST 5 funds. The first one we did was for the balance of the original $1.5 million budget for the engineering project going on at Academy Creek right now. The second one was for doing the lining work in Sea Palms, the CIPP sewer rehab work in Sea Palms, which is expected to kick off in January. And this project here that's coming before you is the balance of a $178,595 SPLOST 5 amount for repairing water lines on St. Simons, specifically in the Sea Palms East area. So this IGA would allow Glynn County to transfer those funds to us and for us to facilitate that project. If we do not do this, then we have to bid the project through Glynn County in order to move forward. So this is also on the Glynn County agenda tomorrow as well, I do believe.
We have a motion?
I move that the Finance Committee recommend entering into an intergovernmental agreement with Glynn County for the remaining SPLOST 5 funds in the amount of $178,595 for water repairs to Sea Palms East.
Second.
We have a second and a motion? I think you have to be on the Finance Committee to say.
Oh, yeah, there, you're right.
Is there any further discussion or question?
This will be the last of the SPLOST 5 funds from Glynn County that were for water and sewer projects. So this will be tidying up the last of that.
Okay.
Well, let's take a vote then. Motion on the table. All in favor? Raise your right hand. Motion passes. That one moves forward to the full committee tomorrow. Item 6, Ridgewood water plant contract award and budget adjustment, and that is Andrew.
Yes, sir. We have recently taken bids on the Ridgewood Water Production Facility. That is a current fire well in the North Mainland District. It is an Upper Floridan well that we are asking to convert over into a production well. We'll be adding a ground storage tank and treatment capacity there so that we can bring that on for drinking water purposes. We took bids and had 5 bidders come in. The low bid was Southern Civil, who bid just shy of $1.4 million. This project was scoped back in 2012 or 2014, and so the budget that was put in place at that time is no longer appropriate. We expected this. We've been in discussions with the engineer since we kicked this project back off, and the project did come in under the engineer's estimated cost. So we were requesting awarding the contract to Southern Civil to do this work, as well as an additional $650,000 to the budget for completion of this project out of the R&R reserve. And Mr. Klein is here. He is one of the project managers on this project and can answer questions about the technical nature of it if you have questions.
I'd like to hear a little bit about the reasoning for the difference of the $600,000 between the 2014 budget and the current budget.
That is a good question, obvious question to answer. 2014, obviously there's been some construction cost increases since then. This is comparing it to the Hampton project that was done in 2015, which was a much smaller project, which came in right around $1 million. Yeah, I don't quite know that they hit the mark on the budget estimate back in 2014.
Let me follow on if I can with this, Todd. In 2014, we had a project estimate of what this might cost, but as I understand, we didn't put that out for bid at the time.
Correct. That was just a
Okay.
placeholder, as I understand it, too.
Right, for general planning purposes, it was just a placeholder for that. We didn't do any bid work at the time. Now, here it is, 5 years later, we've taken bids, and we have actual cost in the bid, if you will. So that's the remarkable difference, and that's why you're asking for a budget or project allocation addition of $650K, which would obviously support awarding the bid. Okay, I've got it straight then. Thank you.
It would cover the bid price plus a $75,000 work allowance for incidentals that come up during the project, so we don't have to come back and reallocate more funds if that were to happen during the project.
Understood, as a contingency.
Yes, sir.
And how was the engineering handled for this project?
The engineering was done, it was actually originally drawn back in 2014 and put on a shelf, and then we dusted that one off this summer, and they updated it to today's standards. It was Richardson, Garrettson Associates 5 years ago. Unfortunately, that is now just Richardson by himself. Mr. Garrettson is no longer practicing.
So there were some fees associated with that?
Yes, we had to
that are in
pay
this
some.
new number?
We had to pay for the original design out of the $1 million original budget, plus an additional $100,000 for dusting off the plans, plus on-site inspection during construction.
The majority of that sunk cost is already spent, the
Yes.
173.
And what is the on-site inspection?
They will be here the engineers will be here during construction to inspect the way it's being done, any tie-ins, any major work that's being done like that. They will be here to witness to make sure it's being done according to standards.
So the engineer will be on call for on-site inspection as needed at some agreed-to hourly rate,
That's correct.
plus expenses. And who makes that choice to bring them in?
I would, or project manager, yes,
And so we can do on-site inspection ourselves?
absolutely. That is the intent.
And for the vast majority of this, we will do that in-house. For the major parts of this, we'll want the engineer of record here. But for the vast majority of this, they will not need to be here for inspection purposes.
Okay.
Do we have a design cost? When we did we have a cost from the engineer that put this together before we bid it?
This one we did.
And what was that?
It was just a little bit over.
So the design cost when he did it today or when he did it 5 years ago? When he did his estimated cost at today's dollars, it was.
$650,000? That was
No.
Elmo Richardson?
Elmo he come in and said it was going to be 1.45 million for the project when we bid it this time. The 650,000 would be added to the existing $1 million budget minus what's been spent on engineering to cover the
Okay.
construction
So
costs.
when we fully engineered it this time, the should cost was $1.4 million?
That's correct.
Okay. Is that in this piece of paper?
I do not know that it's in this memo, no, sir, but that was the number that they suggested.
Yeah, I've got a copy of the engineer of records estimate here, so we can include that.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to have those.
So the original budget was 1 million.
Right,
All that, you've spent approximately
100
173 in design.
right.
So all that, there's approximately 830 left or whatever in round numbers. And you're saying, hey, we need to go forward the rest of it because cover the construction, you need 650.
That is correct.
Finance already looked at this?
This is finance.
I mean, I meant to say facilities, I'm sorry.
Facility's gonna see it in an hour.
So facilities after this?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it was before this.
I got a question. So where are these firms located at? Where are they? What's their address, basically?
Tell you, Southern Civil's out of the Savannah area, Popco is Albany area, Salt Cross.
Is in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's the one out of Jacksonville we got. Reynolds
Is out of Atlanta.
and PF Moon's South Carolina.
Yeah,
West Point.
there,
West Point.
West Point.
Okay.
And staff is comfortable with Southern Civil performing the work?
They did the Hampton well.
Yeah, I make a comment to that. The personnel that started up Southern Civil came from the original contractor that built the Hampton Point project, which turned out very well. So we're very familiar with the people we'll be working with.
How did that project come in comparison to budget? Their portion, were there any change orders?
The Hampton, none that I recall that were contractor initiated. I can go back and verify for sure
Can you provide that tomorrow?
Mr. Chairman, you ready for a motion? I move that the Finance Committee recommend to amend the existing Ridgewood Water Production Facility budget by $650,000 to a new total of $1,650,000. I'll further move that the Finance Committee recommend entering into a contract with Southern Civil LLC in the amount of $1,398,532 for the construction of the Ridgewood Water Production Facility.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion? Questions? Motion on the table, all in favor, signify by raising the right hand. Motion passes, moves forward to the full committee tomorrow. And now we're moving to discussion. Item 1, potential pension changes. Andrew.
Okay, we have been discussing for a few HR committee meetings and one finance committee meeting to date, potentially changing our existing pension program. There's been discussion of grandfathering the existing employees in and creating a date where the new employees would go on the new plan, which would be a 3% contribution by the employee. With GMA, it'd be the exact same calculation of retirement benefit, but instead of the Joint Commission paying all 6%, the employee would pay 3% for that, and the commission would pay 3% of that. Discussions with GMA, it would take about 90 days to make any changes to our plan. So if we decide to make changes to our plan, it's gonna take about 3 months to get that done. So if we want to match it up with, say, a budget year or something, that gives you a timeline there. If you want to do just whenever available, we can do that. Mr. Dorminey issued a memo earlier this week. Would you like to speak to that? No? Okay. But essentially, the recommendation that we've discussed is to continue to grandfather the existing employees in as the costs decrease, as new employees come on, to continue to fund it at the exact same amount to pay off the unfunded portion quicker. We can have the unfunded portion paid off in roughly half the time if we continue to contribute the same amount we've been contributing as new employees come onto the new plan.
I guess I was looking at some of that. We have limited information here, but the 3%, there is, that would be a contribution by the employee, and what you're suggesting is that would be for new employees only.
That's correct.
Is that correct? No change for existing employees?
That is correct.
And for new employees only, they would stay in the pension program, but they would have a 3% contribution. I seem to recall a statement somewhere in that discussion when I was looking at the writing that said that the evaluation indicated that the health of the plan would remain the same with that 3% contribution, that sort of thing.
Unless we contributed additional funds, I recommended continuing to contribute the $650,000 roughly that we are now. As our costs decrease with new employees coming on the plan, there will be a shortage or a gap there between the $650 and say $600 in a couple of years. We'll continue to attribute that $50,000 to that, and that will actually pay off that unfunded portion more rapidly.
And so the question I have, I'm wondering if they considered, when they did that evaluation, that analysis, did they consider that when an employee leaves, vested or not, vested is one scenario and not vested is another scenario, but in all cases, I believe, they will have the right to their 3% contribution.
That's
to
correct.
come out of that pot. And so that cash flow should come out of the pot, and how does it affect the health of the fund if they do that?
You're correct. The employee would be eligible to receive their contribution to the pension plan back once they left. But the remainder that the Joint Water and Sewer Commission contributed to it would remain in the plan and effectively offset some of the
Okay, so, now let me make sure I understand this.
The offset was based on what was left, or did it include the employees'
No, it did not
portion
include.
staying in the fund?
It did not include the new employees' portion staying in the fund. But the market value of our pension plan is around $5 million. It's unlikely that one employee would contribute enough prior to being vested to significantly impact the amount of money in that plan at 3% of their salaries.
And once they're vested, they get their portion, which includes our portion.
That is correct.
I
And
just
they
wanna
can
make
take
sure.
that,
No, they're
That
vested
stays
in
in
the.
the fund.
That stays in the fund, and when they reach retirement age, they will get whatever benefit is due to them being vested.
so in that scenario, if they left after 3 years, they're
Take their 3%.
30% vested, can they or can they not take the 3% and stay vested?
At that point, once they become vested, then they
It
have to
stays.
meet- Then they have to meet the retirement eligibility criteria.
And as part of the potential changes we had discussed for new employees, no longer beginning the vesting period at 3 years, but having potentially a 10-year cliff for vesting rights on the program.
So what are we doing today? Just discussing this as an update to hear about?
Discussing this to see which direction we wanted to go. There were some questions at the HR committee and the finance committee, and we wanted to get both committees together to get a more complete picture of the direction we want to move forward.
Yeah.
This is just such a big ticket item. I mean, it's got long-term implications for the health of the utility, financial health of the utility. And it's obviously got immediate impact and long-term impact to the team members. I think we need to get somebody who speaks this language and does this every day, who doesn't sell pensions, to come in and talk to us about it and being able to do an evaluation and see what our long-term sustainability is. I mean, we don't want to find out where Chicago in 20 years.
What I'd like to see is, I'm in agreement with you, and what I'd like to see is consider, among other alternatives, would be a completely, for existing employees, the option is keep the plan. For brand-new employees, the option is, there'd be several options, I guess, we could study, but one would be something similar to what in the private sector is a 401K. What is it, a 403 or something? in
It's a
this?
457. We do offer an,
457?
we offer a 457 for our employees now. We just don't match anything they contribute into that pot.
And that plan would be a completely 457 without a pension whatsoever for new employees, just a whole separate plan.
That
And-
goes the difference. Whatever.
And then as another alternative, for existing employees, that we calculate a present value of their funds in the existing pension fund and give them the option to move it over into that other plan if they want to change. Or they can stay in the existing pension plan. That would be their choice. That would be something that I'd like to see us evaluate.
Because the difference is if you're giving somebody 6% matching every year, and you're giving 6% into a bucket that's, pays them for the rest of their life, if it's a matching program, if it underperforms, you've done your obligation, you put the 6% in. If you put it in and it underperforms, 40 years from now, you still got an obligation that you're having to make up, and you're making shortfalls.
And the other one, is it 454?
457.
457, now, there would be options, they would have choices where they could put their investments in that plan.
That is correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if a person retires under the pension plan and they pass away in 5 years, it's over, unless they have some sort of spousal option.
They have a spousal option.
With the other plan,
With the existing pension
with the
program,
other 457, that money is there for the family.
with the existing pension the defined benefit program, there is a spousal option you can take. You get less money as when you retire, but you can make sure that that continues
Well, I
after
think
your.
part of that is an insurance program.
Right.
If you die before retirement, there's a death benefit paid.
GMA allow that to be taken out where they would invest it in a 457 plan? I'm not sure.
I have not asked that question.
I just think we need somebody who's an expert on this, who does this every day, to come in and look at the health of the plan, not GMA, because GMA's selling the plan, but somebody who comes in and looks at the health of the plan and says, where are we gonna be at 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 60 years from now? Are we setting it up where, there's a reason that, the railroads and the big institutions, for-profit companies, and even governments are getting away from pensions over the long haul just because they're not funded in real time, and then you end up just kicking the can down the road to somebody else. So we need to make sure we're funding it in real time and staying up to date every single year, or look at the options.
I don't think GMA's selling it. I think they're administering the plan.
Well, but their jobs are based off of, everybody closes closes the pension plans, the GMA administrators.
They provide this for all cities and municipalities
Sure, yes.
and counties.
My point is they still have a vested interest. I mean, the plan administrator wouldn't have a job if there wasn't any plans. I just think we need somebody who's, to look at the long-term viability and tell us we're okay. I mean, that's all I really want, somebody to say, y'all are okay, you're not.
Well, for reference, our plan is currently better funded than the entire state of South Carolina's retirement program.
Right now, we don't have a funding problem.
But are we in the future? Who knows?
Well, I think
We're
maybe,
at 65 or?
yeah, we'll look at, who's our pension, didn't we just have an audit recently? Did they audit the pension plan as well?
They stated the liability portion of it.
GMA has a separate audit of their plan.
So they didn't audit our pension plan recently?
We're one member of GMA's total plan, and GMA has a of their total plan.
The audit that we had, they basically looked at from our financial perspective,
Right.
what the
They
funding
didn't look at-
portion would be.
Okay.
If I recall, when Mr. Glynn was here, he indicated that they did look at that and he didn't see anything alarming at that time.
So at this point, my feeling is let's move this back out of the committee for some further evaluation from staff.
Okay.
I just
Bring
think we
it
need to have
back.
somebody, and there's gotta be somebody out there, I don't know who it is, but, be willing to bet that when CSX Railroad made their transition and with, all the big institutions, they didn't just do it on their own, they had somebody come in and look at it and say what the options are.
Well, I think what you're trying to say, we need more options than just the ones that we have been presented. We need some other options and take a look at those too as well. Is that what you're saying?
I just think
basically.
we need somebody who does this for a living, I mean, surely there's a accounting firm or law firm or
There
somebody
are,
we can.
this has been going on
Right,
all
I
over
mean,
the country.
Everybody's, done it at some point.
And there should be some more options. And we want to give our employee base
Absolutely,
flexibility,
absolutely.
control, if possible, security, and maybe own those assets if they were, after they retire or if they leave. That they can actually leave those in a will to the rest of their family, that sort of thing.
I have a question. Have we looked at the labor market that we compete in to determine what the options that the employee has besides working for us?
From a salary and benefits perspective, we have compared against other water utilities near us, near in size, in locale, and based off of board-operated versus city-run utilities. We've presented that, and the statement that was made was benefits typically range between 38 and 42% of that package. So that has been looked at. We have not compared to private industry.
I want to know, what was it that drove us to want to change? Was it something because it was a blip, we know something was going to happen terribly in the future? Or was it that we just know that eventually our trend going to be detrimental to us as we keep going the same route we're going now? Was that the reason why for our discussion to try to change?
I think the reasoning was the long-term increases in that payment could be unsustainable. I think right now, there's no reason for that to cause us alarm, but if that doubles in the future, then certainly that's going to cause us problems. And as salaries increase, that 6% payment increases.
Right, well, also, we know that, companies are getting away from actually paying defined benefit programs anyhow. They're getting away from, they actually paying for that, and they're passing a lot of that towards the employee, and also maybe letting the employee make the choices themselves to invest their own money. So that may be one of the reasons why. I don't know if we can keep going with the company keep paying that fund, that pension like that. That's maybe something harder we can't do. Maybe that's what's driving it, I don't know. However, as Commissioner Stevens said, maybe some different options versus, I'm pretty sure you looked at more than one when you presented it to us, but maybe some more options. We didn't look at the one that he was recommended by the 401K. We didn't look at that. So it might be something that's good. I don't know.
I read an article one time that, and I don't remember the specifics of it, so please don't quote me on the exact dates, but like the last Civil War pension in this country was paid out in 2003. I mean, 140 years after the Civil War. And the reason is because, some 90-year-old man married a 20-year-old woman and gave her the widow's pension, and she was still getting it in 2003. And don't quote me on the date, it might have been 2007, it might have been 2000. It was very, very recently that we were still paying. And that's the problem with the pension is you don't know.
Sounds like a pretty good benefit for that fella to me.
But,
Say so too.
we need to make sure that we have something sustainable for the long, we're a very young utility. We need to make sure that we're doing things now that are gonna be in place.
Well, I think one thing that's happening too, we are very nice to our employees. We are very, amenable to trying to make them whole when they retire. So, and in that aspect, I think that's one of the reasons why we did the defined benefit plan, because we want to make sure they're whole when they leave, because they're doing such good work for us while they're working for us. However, sometimes a company can't continue to pay that benefit like that. So they got to figure out different ways. A lot of people have changed. A lot of companies have changed.
I looked at that list of investments that our plan is in with GMA, or through GMA. And I read the verbiage about no leverage. Leverage was not permitted. And the question that comes to my mind is, where is leverage not permitted? If leverage is not permitted, it's not permitted, period. But is it okay? I mean, leverage that it's referring to, I think, or maybe suggested, I think it's no leverage, but in this case, maybe someone's drawing a line and saying GMA can't borrow money and lever that investment somewhere else. So what's the difference if they use that money to buy into an entity that then borrows the money and levers the inside of their business? That fund is invested in multiple entities that are levered. And I don't see how they managed to do that based on the guidelines of no leverage.
I believe to not answer your question, but to Commissioner Stevens' point, for that level of question, I think we probably need to get an expert in here to discuss that. Because unfortunately, I don't think any of us are pension and/or investment experts.
And I don't think we have to spend a lot of money to do that. I'm not recommending we go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, I think part of our search and whoever we bring in is to look at options beside GMA to manage it. I would like to know, is there a law that says we have to have another government entity manage our pension plan?
No.
I think we ought to look at that. If we're gonna look at what's a 457 plan, well, what are the alternatives if we go outside the government to see if we can establish 401 K plans in which we contribute a certain amount or we don't contribute a certain amount?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let's look at all of those kinds of options.
Yeah, if we're gonna, I think what we have to do for our current employees is maintain what we have.
I think
I
so.
like your idea about giving them an option.
Let them have the option.
Let
if they
them
wanna
have
come
the
out.
option, but, they have the option to go, no, I want to stay where I am. And then when we're talking about new employees, and then the other thing that we need to look at is when we offer this, how attractive is that to a new employee rather than going to work for somebody else?
We do need to think about that too. I agree.
So,
Okay, we finished with that one?
I am.
Okay, item 2 on discussion is healthcare plan staff feedback. Andrew?
Yes, sir. At the previous Human Resources meeting, or the previous two, actually, we discussed with Katina Tyndall with First Coast Benefits our upcoming insurance renewal, which hopefully we'll get the information a little quicker this year, but usually comes up in January for our plan to start in March. We looked at some options on why our costs are going up, how last year, if you recall, we went with some higher deductible plans for our employees because our costs went up so dramatically. And last year, the entirety of that cost change was put on the employees. The joint water did not take any of the increase. Looking at this year, based off our claim history for 9 months, we appear to be in a better shape as far as a renewal, but we won't know that till we get the renewal cost. At the last HR meeting, I discussed having a focus group with a random assortment of staff members to see how our changes have impacted the way they're using the insurance. So I randomly selected 2 employees from every division and invited them to a meeting to discuss. We had about 95% of those people show up, which was better participation than I was expecting. So they all showed up, and to sort of summarize the thoughts, naturally all of them think they should pay less for health insurance because everybody wants to pay less for everything. But one of the main things we talked about was the wellness program. We had discussed incentivizing them to go get a physical each year and maintain that. The incentive that seemed to gain the most traction was the additional day off a year if they got a wellness check. We had discussed that in the meeting. We also discussed maybe entering into a raffle or something of that nature. There was some excitement about the raffle, but the extra day off really got a lot of traction there. The other thing we asked them was, has the higher deductible amount prevented you from going to the doctor? And for the vast majority of the people in the room, the answer to that question was yes, that they are not going to the doctor because if they think it costs them too much, they can't afford to go to the doctor unless it's a major situation. So we brought up the health reimbursement account that we had discussed of potentially if you went to the HSA, we would contribute the second $2,500 to that plan. Asked what options they had, what were their concerns with that, and their concerns were how were they going to come up with the first $2,500.
But doesn't our insurance plan, except for one of the really high deductibles, which I was against, but doesn't our insurance plans cover preventive stuff at 100%?
Depending on how the doctor codes the procedure,
Well, I mean,
yes.
if it's just a standard annual checkup.
All wellness is covered at 100%,
Okay, so wellness is covered at 100%, there's no reason for it to prevent somebody from going to the doctor.
not for wellness checkups.
Right.
Well, we had a situation where an employee's spouse needed some diagnostic testing that would have going to require them to come up with the full deductible, and they have not had that testing done.
Yeah, I think most of the labs now you have to pay for, don't you?
If it's outside of the basic wellness testing, yes.
Yeah, so it's basically, it's a wellness visit, but you don't have really what you need to do a wellness visit,
If you have-
which
if
is
you have a
the
problem
look at
going
the,
on, it's gonna go towards your deductible.
Right. If you're well, then you don't pay anything, but if you're sick and there's a reason for you to get that lab work, you have to pay for it.
I know I'm lucky in that I have Medicare and military, and that pays for most of it. But the doctor relies on the labs. And what we need is alternatives so that our people can get their labs taken care of, which is the diagnostic portion. Because, you know, you go in and you say, yeah, I'm feeling great, doc. Well, you're within your weight, you're within your blood pressure, and you're within your whatever else it is they tested for, pulse rate, I guess. And the doctor doesn't have anything to look at to see what your cholesterol is, because you may have a very high cholesterol and be close to a heart attack. But if you're not getting the labs, they're not going to know that.
I think general labs are included in the wellness, I mean, you
Yeah.
go.
Are they?
A full panel of general labs are included at in that
Okay.
100% covered.
So basically, they give you a lab order, you go in the day before, or a couple days before, you get the lab order, and then the lab sends it directly to the doctor, you go to the doctor's visit, he reviews all that stuff with you.
Okay, as
and
long
that
as
should
they're
be
getting
covered
that,
in the-
they need to understand that then.
Again, I will say it depends on how the doctor's office codes it, because I've paid for every lab I've had, even for a physical. So it entirely depends on how they code it.
Well, see, there's some confusion here, because I kind of was going based on what you had told me that you paid for all your labs. You're an employee of the hospital, and you're saying the doctor should get those as part of the wellness visit.
Yeah, that was part of the Affordable Care Act that was passed. All of that lab work is free. Any person gets a free checkup every year, basically, and a colonoscopy.
Well, then I
After the age of 50.
Well, then I need a lot of money
After
back.
the age of 50, okay?
Well, we need to know more.
So all of the,
I mean, in general,
Insurance comes under that.
I think we should have a program that incentivizes people to be healthy, obviously. But also that incentivizes them to go to the routine checkups and the doctors and doesn't preclude them, and the deductible's not so high that it precludes them from, going, when they have something actual wrong. Doesn't preclude them from going and getting the expensive procedures because the deductible's so high. Unfortunately, what that means is people pay a higher premium. You know, and I know we talked at length last year about making it where people pay a very low premium and high deductible. I'm personally against that. I think we should have reasonable premiums. Ultimately, it's an insurance policy, and everybody pays a reasonable premium, and then your deductibles are also reasonable. I'm not a big fan of the $5,000-$10,000.
Well, I will say that it's not just major procedures that people are not going to. We did have people indicate that seeing a specialist with a $50 or $60 copay, they are not going to because they don't have the $50 or $60. We have a large portion of our workforce that lives paycheck to paycheck.
We have a $50 copay for a specialist in our insurance plan?
That's correct.
Pretty high. Do you need any more from us on item?
Now,
What is the plan going forward to, address this for the next year?
Katina is supposed to be getting their potential renewals prior to the end of the year, and she will be here in January to discuss our options with us. So I wanted to give you the feedback the staff gave so that you could use that for your decision-making processes when we looked at that in January.
Well, we need to,
Last year we had go ahead, I'm sorry.
all I was gonna say is we need to have a list of what they get from wellness for free. And then what they get when they go visit the doctor when they have something. And I'm not opposed, because I do want employees going to not get sicker. And we look at funding a health reimbursement portion for them such that maybe we can ease their out-of-pocket costs.
Last year we had a small committee, kind of
Yeah.
work directly with y'all, and that seemed to work pretty good. You didn't like that?
I don't know. I'm not in favor of that. I don't think this is what I felt. I felt I was rushed, and I didn't think I made a good decision.
It was rushed, no doubt.
That's why she's trying to get it to you a couple of weeks earlier this year. Not that that's a tremendous amount more time, but it's a 50% improvement.
I mean, you just said you didn't like the options that we approved.
I tried to vote against it, but I did vote against it, I guess, for lack of a better term, but, the ultra
We
high
gave 'em-
deductibles and.
$1,500 deductible, a $3,500 deductible, and a health savings account.
I thought we gave them $5,000.
$5,000 a health saving.
Yeah, 5,000 on that. But we didn't fund any of that.
There's something you guys want to see at the next Finance Committee meeting on this issue?
I think that the next issue, when Katina's ready to talk to us, we ought to be in a joint session again.
The joint, between HR and
Yeah.
Finance,
And she should have those options available to us in January.
in January. What's the first meeting in January?
The 16th
16th?
We have a finance meeting set up for the 15th,
15th.
too.
Should be on the 15th.
should be on the 15th,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So let's look at that on the 15th,
Yes, sir.
along with what we previously discussed, pension.
Yes, sir.
Item 3, financial statements. They just keep looking better and better, don't they?
Yes, they do. In your packages, you have the financial statements for the 5 months ending November 30th. First of them being the balance sheet. Just a few comments on that. You'll see under current assets, our bond sinking fund at November 30th was just short of $2.2 million. This is where the balance sheet is measured as of November 30th. On January or December 1st, there was a bond interest payment made out of that in about $1 million. So that's the day after this this statement date, that reduced by about half. Next line down, our accounts receivable are continuing to go down. Net after allowances, just short of $1.7 million compared to $2.4 million at the beginning of the year. Our restricted cash accounts, reserves are continuing to grow as we receive cash, but again, those projects are all in the works. Once construction begins on all of those will deplete fairly rapidly. Then further down under the current liabilities, you'll see at June 30th, we had $1.3 million of payables as of that date. Again, we're down to just under $269,000 at the end of November. No further comments on the balance sheet unless someone has questions.
Where do we project our interest income to be once we get moved over to Synovus? Do we have a projection on how much that's gonna grow?
It probably won't change significantly from the projections at BB&T because, again, the investment portfolios themselves will actually, we own all of those individual investments, so they'll all move over intact to
There'll be a
Synovus.
decrease in investment fees.
Fees will reduce, yes.
How big a number is that?
Pardon me?
How big a number is that?
The fees?
Yeah, I mean, what is the
Right now,
net change?
it's 2.5 basis points on the portfolio value, and that will be reduced to 1 basis point.
1.5% on the portfolio value, which is, what's the portfolio value roughly? 30?
That's on the next page, the amounts that are in there as of November 30th. $8.2 million in the operating reserve, 3.2 in the capital
25, sorry.
reserve, and about $13.5 million in the repair and replacement reserve.
Well,
25 million. Is that it?
Yeah, 25 million in.
well, it's 25 million on the second page, 45 million on the first page.
Flip back over. It's the 25 million here plus the 6 and 3 here, so that's 35 million. The overall reserves includes money that's not invested like the SPOS account.
I
Oh,
still
sorry.
think the SPOS account should be
Nine,
invested.
that's lost count.
So by going to, from the BB&T investment alternative, it's a point, it's 1.5%.
No, it's 0.015%.
0.015%.
As stated in terms of basis points, which is 1/10 of a percentage.
So it's 0.015 times $30 million? You wanted a number.
Right, yeah.
0.015 times $30 million is the savings that we're gonna have by making that change.
I still, though, you know, if we got 25 million invested out of 45 million, I think that's an issue.
We've got 35 out of
Well,
45.
there's actually more than that, Commissioner.
We got
There's
35 out of 45 invested, I still
The
think that's an issue.
capital improvement fees of $6.7 million in total, $6.3 million of that's invested.
So
of the
the bulk of what's not
$3.2 million
invested is the SPOS account.
I just don't understand why we can't invest in SPOS. I know we talk about this every couple of months, but
I think there's provisions.
Right.
No, I think we cannot do that.
you
by
can,
law.
we're not?
I don't believe we can, no.
Really?
Yeah, I'd have to look into that, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that.
I mean, SPOS is for specific projects and whatever, so you probably could have it in an account and interest bearing, but you can't not invest it because now you're taking money to, from what's called to invest money.
I'm not talking about investing it for 20 years, but if you got $6 million sitting there that's not gonna be allocated for 180 days when the project concludes, why can't that 180 days it be getting treasury bonds? And if the law says you can't, the law says you can't.
Yeah, I imagine treasury bond, but what, I'm sure they are stable, secure, but, you know, if you try to invest in some other,
Yeah, I mean,
financial thing, that doesn't happen, so you're really, doing a disservice to the community.
I think you'd run into some political problems, because we have to have the voters to vote that. And if you
Yeah,
start
it might be
start
problematic.
doing that, and they see that you're banking the money.
I think it's,
Yeah,
I think
that's-
the opposite. If I'm a voter and I know that you're gonna sit there and earn $6.5 million.
Well, more than likely, you put in an account that you'll get some interest, but more than likely, that's what, and you get
They're
some
in,
type of interest.
they are in money market accounts, which do draw some interest, which is not.
But to your question, Commissioner, of the Commission restricted reserves, $25 million of that is invested. The $6.3 million of the capital improvement fees are invested, and just over $3 million of the deposits are invested. So that's about $35 million. The remaining $1 million to that 45 on the balance sheet is the SPOS money, in rough numbers.
We'll simplify that for you and get that SPOS money spent.
Yeah, and I absolutely think we should, spend the SPOS money, that's what we've been committed to do, but I mean, while it's not being spent, I just think we ought to
Well, I mean,
invest in the sports and
the electorate, is going, you still have 2,000, or SPOS 5 money?
I agree with that too,
Are they talking about me in that aspect?
So, I mean,
Well, much of that becomes encumbered at the point that we execute a contract to begin construction. While a contract may not yet be underway, that money's encumbered. So we can't invest it with any kind of terms that would limit us to be able to draw it out the same day. And that's a limitation right there. The total amount of money, while it is a lot of money, the limitations for us are significant, such that we just spin our wheels to try to come up with other reasons.
But it is like $10 million in round numbers. If it was just drawing money market rates,
It is.
It is.
15,000 a year.
it is drawing that, yes.
But if it's drawing 2.5% interest, which are treasury bond rates, I mean, on 3 month bonds, or last time I looked, been several months, but, I mean, that's real money. And to your point, we don't want to encumber money that's gonna be spent on a project, but just with the pay application process of.
Let's
your
just
project's
check
gonna
into
be
the
made off the money.
legalities, because it could be misconstrued that, hey, we're sandbagging the SPOS money to make
No, it
interest off
definitely
of
won't
it
do
and
that.
using that money somewhere else, and
But it could be misconstrued too, that we're collecting $100 million when we only had to collect $97.5 million and we'd invested it.
I'm with you. It just, let's just find out what the law is.
Charlie, can we get an opinion on that? And then we'll know what we can talk about with regards to our limitations for investing any of the SPOS money that's not obligated.
A lot of that would be determined by the intergovernmental agreement that we entered into with the county. But, I know you can have it in an interest-bearing account, but I'll look into what else you can do with it.
Right. I think that'll better guide our discussion.
So
Exactly what we're asking.
So for clarification, the 35 million we were talking about, the 35 million investment at 1.5 basis point savings to go to Synovus, that's a savings, an annual savings of about $52,000 a year?
You said .015?
It's point, it's
That's
.0015.
0.0015, 1.5 basis points, so that's
That's
52,500.
52.5.
Right. that's right.
$52,500. So changing, that decision to change will alone be worth $52,000 to us. We're leaving it on the
5,200.
table right now.
Based on the portfolio values as of November 30th.
Great. Let's continue with this report.
Saving money.
All right, on the next page is the combined revenue statement for the 5 months ended. As the Finance Committee requested, the first two columns of this are fiscal year 2019 actual numbers as of last year's fiscal end. And then the 11/30/19, that's the 5-year or 5 months year to date a year ago. So we can compare July to November of 19 to July, or 18 to July to November of 19. Then the balance of it, 20,000, or this year's budget, pro rata budget, and actual year to date. Going to the actual year to date column, it's the net revenue before capital fees and SPOS. We're actually at $1.142 million of surplus. This revenues over expenditures for the first 5 months of this year.
However, $1 million of that is in encumbrances.
You're getting ahead. We have $1 million of purchase orders outstanding, so that actually comes down to about $1 million or $100,000 of revenue over expenses if all of those purchase orders were liquidated.
Which number are we talking about?
Net revenue before capital fees and splost. It's about 2/3 of the way down the page.
Of 1.18 being reduced, or
The 1.14 in the
1.
year-to-date actual, and then the purchase orders of 1 million leaves a total revenues over expenditures of 100,000 to date.
okay, to date. So our estimated year end that we have here, and I realize we're not weighted in any way, it's just multiplying.
Oh, no, they're weighted now.
These are weighted?
We're getting to
We're
that.
actually 4.2 million forecasted, over collected by year end?
That's because we do not budget capital improvement fees or splost revenues.
And so capital improvement fees were,
270.
we are 278,000 over budget?
Since there
Right
is,
now.
yes, because we've collected 278 to date and there is no budget.
And those.
We're expecting to collect 668,000 by the end of the fiscal year?
I would expect at the very minimum that. We've got some large projects that may be paying capital fees soon.
Again, we don't include these numbers in the budget because they are completely restricted funds that we collect and that goes directly to the restricted investment funds. We'd have to, for accounting purposes, we have to report that as income, but it's not really income to us. The same with the SPLOST funds. Those are monies come in, we have to report them for accounting purposes as revenue, but they're dedicated to specific projects and cannot be used for operations.
But we can use them for projects, restricted.
Yes. Okay, now getting to your question of year-end estimations, we went through some of the expense line items and made specific changes to some of them where we knew it was seasonal or for some other reason was front or rear-end loaded. But the major thing that we did was looking at the first 4 lines: sewer revenues, water revenues, debt charges, and administrative fees. To project, we had been projecting year-to-date times a pro rata amount to year-end. So for the first 5 months of the year, we would assume that 41.67% of our revenues happened within the first 5 months. What we changed to get started at this was we took the percentage of revenues collected in the first 5 months of 2018 and compared that to the fiscal year ending 19, which was the 18-19 year. So, for instance, the sewer revenues, we finished the year at 13,884. And as of a year ago, this November, we had 6.279%, or $6.279 million of actual revenues at that point. So 45% of our sewer revenues were collected in the first 5 months of the last fiscal year. So taking that number and projecting and using that and applying that to the collections or the billings for the first 5 months of this year, we would project that we would end the year at $13,493,000, which is quite a bit less than our budget at this point.
John, just to summarize on revenues, our forecast, estimated year end, 32 million. We budgeted 33 million. So what I see is we're on track, assuming this is weighted, we're in the glide path. We won't be over collecting to budget. We'll actually could land at about $1 million under based on the current trajectory.
Using the
Right.
formulas that we've developed to
Right.
date.
So
yes.
the point I'm going to make, we're not over collecting.
1,120,000 under collected
Right.
revenue.
So we'll be
Potentially.
under collecting on the cash register. However, on the expense side, there's good news there. So the good news there is we're also driving those costs down, which will help with that forecasted shortfall of $1 million in revenue. So overall, it looks good. While we're forecasting an under collection, we're also going to underspend.
And Commissioners, I believe part of the under collection to date is the fact that we lost a week of revenue when we had an evacuation. So that would explain why we are slightly under where we would expect to be at this point. As of last year, we did not evacuate for a week, or 4 days, or whatever it ended up being.
And as we were looking at these numbers, doing this first the first estimation that you see here, we started, Ms. Roberts did some charts that we were looking at, and things didn't look like they were lining up like they should. We've noticed some anomalies and things. So over the past 2 days, Ms. Roberts and I have been going back through, and Mr. Burrows have been going back through historical usages and seeing if, well, did some of these anomalies happen because of irrigation factors when 2018 was wetter than 19? So did that affect it at all? Then we look at customers, and then we look at when billings actually took place, because in some cases, a November billing may not have happened until the first day of December, which would miss the cutoff on the data that we pulled. So we're continuing to go back through all of this data and try to identify those type of anomalies that could drive some of these over and unders that you're seeing in the year-end estimations. So we've got more work to do on it, but I think we're narrowing down on that.
So directionally, we're improving our reporting such that our forecasting is more meaningful.
We hope.
Hopefully.
Yes, it remains to be seen if it turns out that way or not.
Well, we always know if our forecast is good when we get to the end of the year, right?
That's right.
I can assure you that in June, our forecast will be spot on.
It'll be right on.
Right on in
Yeah,
June.
because it adjusts every month, huh? So the estimated year end is weighted.
Yes, sir.
The column here
This
is
one
weighted.
is, yes.
So what you're comparing now is 10,610,000 of net operating revenue versus budgeted of 10,000,007. So you're right at $110,000 short, or not short, but less than expected in budget.
I'm not seeing the
Before you
numbers.
bad debt, interest, debt principal, the net operating revenue.
Yes, you are
line
correct.
items.
Yes, you are correct.
Yes, okay. Any other questions on the revenues? And then there are two different forms of revenue statements here.
So our interest expense, we're counting that as operating revenue.
I'm sorry?
We're counting interest expense as operating revenue?
Income, not expense.
I mean income, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It seems like that would be investment income instead of in operating.
But it's titled, in the actual general ledger, is titled investment and interest income. We combine the interest and the investment.
It stays in those accounts. It doesn't go into general revenues.
Technically, there is some investment income when we sell a security and make a gain on that. Otherwise, the securities that we own actually do pay interest. The bulk of the interest or the bulk of the earnings on the investment portfolio are in the form of interest.
Any more questions?
No, not for me.
Looks like we're all finished.
The last one is the project report.
Oh, okay, project report.
At the time that this was prepared, there's some budget changes today. We have $50 million of budgeted projects with about $14 million completed, either been expended or encumbered on that, leaving $35 million outstanding, which, again, going back to the growing reserves that we see on the balance sheet, a lot of that money is going to be dispersed relatively over the next couple of years. And that's a summary of the top portion of this report is the summary of the projects and costs and sources of funds for those. At the bottom section is the actual computed reserve balances. And again, these balances don't tie directly to the cash amounts because they're trued up at the end of the month. So there are transfers coming through in the first week of December to true up those numbers. But they remain relatively close. So you have about $6.5 million of uncommitted repair and replacement reserve monies and about $1.1 million of uncommitted capital improvement fees. And any questions on that? I went over that relatively quickly, but.
Deposits, what's that interest income on the SPOS?
That would be the, we got interest, overnight interest on that.
The money market interest.
It's in a bank account, but that bank account pays a little bit of interest.
So we got $30,000 out of
Yeah.
the SPOS funds.
Yeah.
Is the interest on SPOS funds restricted?
We're leaving it in the restricted funds, yes.
Okay. Any more questions or discussion? We are at the bottom of the agenda. Do we need an executive session?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Finance? Yes. Okay.
What's the purpose of the executive session? The
Litigation
litigation
and property.
and property. I guess we need a motion then for an executive session for the purpose of
Go into executive session for
litigation and property.
My second.
All in favor? Right hand? Opposed? We're in executive session.
Okay, so.
All right.
I gotta find it short too.
It's in there. I move to come out of executive session.
Second. All in favor? Me. Any further business? No further business coming before the commission. This committee meeting is closed.
According to those clocks.
See you guys later.